Hi everyone, welcome to Studio 14. I'm Kim Newcomer of the City of Fort Collins. Well, spring is definitely in the air, and while that may mean for everybody getting outside and enjoying the trails, for us here at the city, that means it's time to start thinking about our budget process. And it's pretty extensive and a little complicated, but also really important. To tell us more about that, I have our Chief Financial Officer, Mike Beckstead, here in the studio. Mike, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
'Tis the season for budget.
Yes.
You know, most people are thinking, oh my goodness, March. The 2013-14 budget obviously doesn't kick in until January. Why the long planning period?
Well, as you said, we have a fairly extensive budget process, and rightfully so. We only budget once every 2 years, so our budget really covers 2 years.
Right.
So that alone makes it a little more complex than doing an annual budget. But we also use a process called Budget for Outcomes, BFO for short, that really works very hard to tie how we spend our money to the strategic elements of Plan Fort Collins and our other master plans.
Right.
And so that process requires a lot of effort on the part of a lot of different people, really looking for the linkage and the alignment of our resource expenditures against the kinds of things we think will move the needle on our strategic plan.
You know, I actually really like that explanation of it's a blueprint. It's how we're going to accomplish what this community wants, right? And so through the Plan Fort Collins process and through other public input vehicles, we've set 7 areas or 7 priorities that we as a community have said these are important to us. So what are those? I'm going to test you. Can you name all 7, right?
I'm going to probably not. But
okay, we'll do it together.
We've got economic health. We've got environmental health. We've got safety and safe neighborhoods.
Sure.
We've got community livability. And I'm probably not quite getting those words right.
I think it's the gist.
We've got high-performing government or high-performing community. And we have a 7th that is
Culture, Parks and Recreation.
Culture
and Recreation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the 7 areas that we use 2 terms that are interchangeable, results areas or outcome areas.
Right.
And they mean the same thing.
Right. It means that's the result we're working towards. We're working towards a healthy economy.
Right.
Yeah, and so I like this, right? So as a citizen, I remember the first time kind of going through this as an employee, I felt like I was a citizen watching it happen because it was new to me. And it really was, here's what we want to accomplish. Now, city staff, your job is to figure out how.
In the short term.
In the short term.
And you said it very well at the front end. If you look at Plan Fort Collins, you can see a whole lot of objectives and principles inside of Plan Fort Collins, which are the kinds of things that from a long-term 25-year strategic plan are the kinds of things we want to get done. Think of the BFO as a micro look at the next 2 years at the what are the specific things we're going to do in the next 2 years consistent with all of those objectives and all those outcomes.
Yeah. Wow. And it's a process. I mean, when you look at the amount of services and programs that the city provides, it gets into the hundreds upon hundreds.
It does. It does. And if I'll take the process, the BFO process, and kind of break it down into some pieces for a minute. Just it really runs from March through about end of October.
Okay.
Is the timeline that it runs on. We do it every 2 years on even number years. For 13 and 14 is the year that we're budgeting in right now.
Right.
The process, if you break it down, is really kind of 5 major steps.
Okay.
The first step is developing what we call results and purchasing strategies. And I'll talk in detail about each of these in a bit. The second step is the organization and developing offers or proposals with which to meet those results areas.
Right.
The third step is really kind of a negotiative process between the people selling their offers and the people asking for the results. And there's a ranking process in there where they go through and ask questions and get into more detail, but ultimately go through a prioritization process.
Okay.
The fourth step is the city's executive leadership team coming together and doing kind of the same thing, drilling into the results teams and drilling into what they really wanted to accomplish and asking the questions across the offers about how it works. The fifth step is where we take it to the council and for about a 6 to 8 week period have dialogue with the council, pretty extensive dialogue, and really kind of transfer the ownership of that budget from the city manager to the council. And at the end of that process, the council blesses it.
And then it's all wrapped up in a bow by the end of October, early November.
Exactly.
So it can kick into effect in January.
In January, right.
Wow. So let's talk about some of the pieces of that. You know, this first phase, as you said, we're testing and confirming those key results, so those priorities that the community set. And then you also talked about purchasing strategies. So what does that mean?
We have what we call results teams, and they're groups of 7 to 8 people. Most of them are city staff. This year, for the first time, we have citizens who are being incorporated in each of those teams to help foster and help link citizen input into this budget process.
Great.
Though the charter of those teams is to look really hard at that Plan Fort Collins outcome or results area and develop what I'll call a purchasing strategy or a request for results of the kinds of programs they would like to see that they think best meet the objectives of that outcome. So they're really developing almost RFPs, requests for proposals. They're saying these are the kinds of services, or these are the kinds of programs, or these are the kinds of elements that we think we want to spend money on to, again, move the needle on that particular outcome.
So, for example, you take transportation, and I know that these result teams are still sort of working on what those purchasing strategies would be, but just at a broad level, you'll take transportation, and they're going to say, hey, we're looking for services that address, you know, alternative transportation, that address smooth traffic flow, that address, you know, good planning and connectivity.
Right. Better timing on traffic lights.
Very good.
Or you get into environmental health. They might be looking for strategies, again, that reduce our carbon footprint, that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that reduce the waste stream that's coming out of Fort Collins. And those would be kind of conceptual strategies that they're putting out there, and they're looking for specific programs that would meet kind of the objectives of those purchasing strategies.
Got it. So
it's a bit conceptual at that stage.
Right.
It's really not real tangible, but it's kind of directional and conceptual about what kind of programs we want to get to meet those big outcome objectives.
So then the next phase, it gets a little bit more specific.
Now this is when really the entire organization begins to get involved. Each department in each part of the organization it's shared with them what are all the purchasing strategies for each of the outcomes, and so they really put together proposals based on their capability and their part and their role in the organization. They try and link what they can do against one of those purchasing strategies.
Right.
So if you're in the sustainability group, you might be thinking about ways, again, to change the waste stream. What kind of programs for composting could you put together? What kind of programs for energy efficiency could you put together?
Yeah. So what I like about this model is it doesn't say, okay, so my group, communications office. Okay, communications office, tell us how much you're going to cost and some of the things you're going to do. What it really does is it says, city staff, find ways to work together, regardless of department, regardless of area, and come up with ideas, plans, services that are going to help us accomplish these community priorities.
Right. And so it really forces departments that kind of are isolated by themselves to really think about what they can do to think strategically about moving the ball forward on those outcomes.
So all of those, what we call offers, right? They're proposals. I like that word. They're a proposal as to how we're going to accomplish something, also known as offers. All those come in back to the results teams, and then we do this ranking process.
Right.
And what is it ranked on? Is it ranked essentially how effective it meets the end goal, right?
Well, there's a couple of things that come involved in the ranking. There are some things we have to do that are kind of mandatory.
Right.
So you kind of, we have to have a city clerk's office. There's just a requirement for some things that are necessary to keep the city operating. But those are small, really, in the grand scheme of things. Most things are done on an evaluative kind of basis. I think the first ranking really comes down to how well does that offer meet the purchasing strategy's criteria and deliver on whatever that purchasing strategy asks to be delivered on? I think a second criteria is we're starting to try and look horizontally across the 7 outcomes. And so a purchasing strategy that helps influence 3 or 4 outcomes versus just 1 outcome would get a little higher priority rating in that ranking.
Okay.
Council input is a part of it. There are some things that the council has indicated that they think are important.
Right.
That would influence the rankings. The same thing is true with the city manager's office. Things that he thinks are important and the things that he's trying to drive across the city would be important. So it's a give and take kind of process. If March is the time when the results teams are putting things together, their purchasing strategies, April is the time frame where the departments are putting together their proposals or their offers. May and early June is the time frame that those 2 groups are really working together. The results teams are asking questions. They might ask for modifications of the proposals. The offer groups are selling their proposals to the results teams. But at the end of the day, it's the results teams that have the accountability to come up with a ranking. And we've allocated revenue at this stage, and what they do is they start with their first choice, and then their second choice, and then the third choice. And each time they make a choice, their amount of funding remaining comes down. And eventually they get to the point where they've spent all of their dollars, and that's what we call the waterline. Everything below that then is unfunded and are things that we'll still consider a little bit. But that's the allocation of resources process based on that ranking process.
Right. Now, the city budget is much like your home budget. You only have a set amount of resources. So unlike the federal government that can actually spend into deficit, the city has to balance to the dollar. We can't spend more than we have.
Right.
So, you know, I like that visual of a water line. It's everything that's above the line is where we have resources to spend, and everything below, although maybe important, didn't rank high enough to allocate resources to that.
Exactly. Not that it's not important.
Right.
Not that it wouldn't have an impact. It's a prioritization of what has the most impact relative to the dollars we have available.
So what's new this year is that when we get to that point where each of the results teams, each of the key result areas have their list. This is what's funded. This is what's not funded. What's new this year is then citizens will have an opportunity to say, yeah, you nailed it, or wait a second, why is this under the line? I want to move it up and therefore move something else down.
Right.
And I think that's really cool. This is new this year.
Yeah, there's citizen participation in 3 parts. The third part of citizen participation is in that September-October timeframe.
Right.
We've always done that, where we have open houses every 2 weeks, and it's an opportunity for citizens to come in and look at what's in the budget.
Right.
What is unique this year is, 1, having citizens on each results team, so their input is there.
Don't want to forget that.
And then 2, in that June timeframe, we are going to post all of the offers by results area on the web, and citizens are going to have an opportunity to come in and share their views on the ranking, share their views on the value, provide input for it. And that is totally brand new this year.
I think that's really cool. So this is citizen involvement earlier in the process. And what will happen then is results teams and the people that put together those proposals, those offers, will hear that feedback and say, how can I adjust my service? How can I adjust my proposal to better, meet the needs of the community?
Right.
I think that's really cool. And then, okay, so we go through rankings, we get our citizen input, then what happens?
This is when the Darren Atterbury's executive leadership team comes into play. And it's a similar process to that third step. But really what the executive team is looking to do is look again holistically.
Right.
Because results teams are really looking at their individual results.
Right, they're just focused on transportation or economic health.
Exactly.
Okay.
We call it the executive lead team, the ELT. They really look across all of the 7 outcomes. And what we're looking for is, this is below the waterline and it didn't get funded in economic health. And this is above the waterline in transportation. Maybe this is more important than this one that's getting funded in transportation. And so that as well is a very, iterative process. There's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of questions. The results teams each come in and they present their rationale. But at the end of the day, this is where the executive team has an opportunity to put some of their judgment and some of their value structure into the prioritization process. And there's not a lot of significant shifts that go on, but there is what I'll call fine-tuning by having kind of a more holistic view of what's important to the city, what's in Plan Fort Collins, what's important to the citizens, to make sure that allocation of resources is accurate not only within a results area, but across all 7 results areas.
And then ultimately, those discussions and decisions form the city manager's recommended budget.
Exactly.
And then that's an enormous document, but it essentially summarizes all of the work of the past months and proposes to City Council, here's what the city manager and the organization feels the best use of our resources in the next 2 years.
Right. And that's really the 5th step of the process, which we start, if my memory is right, that timeline starts, I believe, in September. And we actually have 3 council work sessions set up in September into early October. Every 2 weeks, we have an intensive dialogue with the council about what is in that budget. And this is where the council has an opportunity to let their priorities and let their belief in what's most important to the citizens come into play in that budget as well.
Yeah, you said, and I really liked the description, it becomes the city staff budget, and then once it's sort of in September, it becomes council's budget and becomes the community's budget even more so.
Exactly.
So that's the process. I think folks were probably diligently taking notes, I'm sure. But I do know that information will be available on the fcgov.com/budget page. A little bit of an overview of what we talked about, as well as some reminders of how to get involved, in particular around that June timeframe. I know there'll be a couple of public events and, of course, the online tool for folks who can't join us in person. And there'll be more detail about that in the coming months and weeks. But if you remember nothing else from this show, fcgov.com/budget, and that will get you through. Before we go, I feel like we should just, take a moment to say, to talk quickly about sort of where we are financially, because so much of the services we provide are contingent upon the resources we have to provide them. So tell us a little bit, Mike, just, the high overview of where we stand as a city in terms of financial health.
We have a AA bond rating,
right,
which speaks to we're healthy financially. I think that our financial health is partly related to the fact that we have historically been I'll say, fiscally conservative kind of organization.
Right.
We haven't gone out and taken on a lot of debt to drive a lot of infrastructure. Our style is typically to pay as we go for infrastructure needs. Now, we do have some bonds that are outstanding to, like, do the Mulberry waste plant. So we do have some debt, but our debt is minimal. Our cash position is good. Our revenue streams in sales and use and property tax is healthy and growing.
Right.
The citizens of Fort Collins were very generous in wanting to maintain our level of services and approved the tax initiative 2B, otherwise known as Plan or Keep Fort Collins Great. So our financial health is good. I won't say we're flush.
Right.
I won't say we're overly optimistic, because world events could change that in a heartbeat. Even national events could change that in a heartbeat. So I see us maintaining our style of being kind of fiscally conservative, but also being, I guess, aggressive in providing the kinds of services that the citizens of Fort Collins really, I think, have not only come to expect, but at the same time really deserve. This is truly a marvelous place to live, and I think it's a combination of all those factors that make it so.
One of the things I really appreciate about this community, and this is a little bit random and probably has nothing to do with the budget, but every time I'm out on a trail or in a park or riding in a bike lane, I love how this community uses the resources that it funds. I've been to and lived in other communities where that's not the case. There'll be miles of trails and no one's on them. There's these beautiful parks that just sit empty. And I truly appreciate, and it makes me feel so good, that when you're out there, you see people taking advantage of their investment. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
this is truly, in my corporate days, I'm a little bit new to the civic organizations, and it's a conscious transition I wanted to make, because it is different working in civic versus working in corporate.
Right.
But in my corporate days, I had to move around quite a bit, as most corporate people end up doing. And in my travels, I have never lived in a place as unique as Fort Collins. Just the commonness of values, the unity of kind of the spirit of what makes Fort Collins a unique place, the consistency, the friendliness.
Yeah.
When I was looking to buy a house, I'd be driving down neighborhoods and people would be out working in the front yards and they would wave at me. And I'm not used to that. I spent a lot of time in Chicago. So it was a wonderful kind of entry process for me coming into Fort Collins with the uniqueness of this community.
Well, I mean, how do we top that? I think that's a great way to end this program.
Okay.
Again, just a reminder, folks, fcgov.com/budget is a great resource for the timeline, for information, and for all the details that we talked about today. So Mike Beckstead, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. I think we'll probably have to have you back and tell us all about how this process turned out.
Okay.
All right. And thank you all for watching. This has been Studio 14. I'm Kim Newcomer at the City of Fort Collins, and we'll see you next time.